Why are speedruns important, and how do they work? Let's break it down. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, you've probably stumbled on videos of your favorite game not so much being played as being destroyed. These are documents of players with outrageous skill beating games in a near miraculous fashion. It looks a little something like this. No, that is not Mario being played by a rogue artificial intelligence from inside the Matrix. It is a speedrun, and speedruns are performed by, wait for it, speedrunners, a subculture of players that convene over the internet with the expressed purpose of completing games as fast as humanly possible. This is part of a tradition that began with Doom, when an online community of die-hard fans started challenging each other to crazy dares. The most exhilarating form of competition was a race to the finish, and the gauntlet was officially thrown. A few years later, in 1997, the Speed Demos Archive was founded as a hub for people to upload videos of themselves playing Quake at breakneck speeds. The rest is hyperactive history. The website now hosts the annual marathon Awesome Games Done Quick, which is a truly amazing event where speedrunners get together to raise money for charity while blazing through games. For instance, at last year's event, a runner paid off his entire debt in Animal Crossing in like a half an hour. So take that, Tom Nook. The desire to be the fastest has led to unbelievable performances that challenge and contort our perceptions of what a game is and how it's played. So in today's show, we're looking into how and why speedrunners do it. The first step to speedrunning is to choose a game and hone in with laser focus. This is probably the second biggest choice in your life after who you will marry in terms of total time investment, so choose wisely. This is your life now. Pulling off a world record-breaking speedrun can take an upwards of 1,000 hours, so let's see. I'll choose The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, one of the most popular games to speedrun. Next, you plan an optimal route through the game. This sounds easy, but it can be a dissertation's worth of work. The speedrunner LackAttack told us he spent 5 months just watching videos of classic Legend of Zelda, and Zero Master invested around 300 hours of study in Doom 2. We're talking about an extreme amount of legwork to beat games in insanely fast times. It's the most beautiful irony. Speedrunners spend more time so they can play less. While it takes a normal player 28 hours on average to complete the game, Joden Stone, the current Ocarina of Time champ, recently completed that game in 17 minutes and 55 seconds, besting the previous world record holder Cosmo by 13 seconds.
Holy crap.
Wait a second. How is that even possible? Well, a normal player's path goes all around Hyrule, starting with clearing the Deku Tree dungeon, then heading to Hyrule Castle for a rendezvous with Princess Zelda, then on to Death Mountain inside Jabu Jabu's belly, and so on. But speedrunners, they do almost none of that. A master speedrunner's approach goes from the first boss fight directly to the last boss fight, where Ganondorf collapses dead at young Link's feet. Wait, what now? This is where glitches come in. Glitches are undesirable little flaws in the game's design, but to a speedrunner, these flaws become opportunities. A good speedrunner will find ways to use them to their advantage by going off the beaten path. As one says, chaos isn't a pit, it's a ladder. The key to Cosmo's route is a glitch in Link's jumping animation, which allows him to squeeze through the warp in the Lost Woods, so he can leave the starting area well before he should be able to. In speedrunning circles, this is known as sequence breaking. It allows a player to break out of the normal sequence of events the designers intended. So instead of heading to the Deku Tree where he should be going, Cosmo goes directly to Kakariko Village. There, he rounds up 8 Kukos, is rewarded a bottle for his effort, and uses the bottle to catch a bug under a rock. Are you taking notes? Then he returns to the Deku Tree with the bugs in the bottle that he shouldn't have yet. This is used to confuse the game with another glitch which lets him play a Deku Stick like an ocarina. This way he can escape the blue warp which normally triggers the cinematic at the end of the level. Duh. This causes a huge sequence break that rips a hole in the structure of the game, literally. We know this because another speedrunner named RobDog had previously analyzed the game's code and found that the door to the Deku Tree's boss was adjacent to Ganon's castle and the game's internal structure, so when Link walks through the door after triggering the glitch, he's warped to the end game. It all makes so much sense. Whoa, what just happened there? If you want the details, we'll link to Cosmo's video below. It's incredible. Now, some of you might be thinking, isn't abusing glitches and hacking into the code basically cheating? To those of us who play games the normal way, maybe, but the Ocarina of Time speedrun reveals something fascinating about the psychology of speedrunners. In their mind, speedruns of Zelda have nothing to do with playing the game as Shigeru Miyamoto designed it. Ocarina of Time is just a computer-generated environment with some fundamental restraints, like spiders hurt you, and you have a limited limited amount of life. According to the Speed Demos archive, the game itself is no longer regarded as a game, but is instead the medium. Within that medium, speedrunners make the rules for any number of games. Sometimes these rules overlap with the designer's rules, such as when clearing the game as fast as possible while collecting all of the items, or beating Zelda blindfolded. But other times, as in Cosmo's run, they are unconstrained by regulations. The game becomes wholly different, one specifically about optimization, and anything allowed within the code is permitted. And this puts speedruns in a category closer to scientific innovation. NYU professor Frank Lance said that when players speedrun, they are scientists, discovering hidden truths about the world of the game and using that knowledge to actually warp space and time. This is the important idea that computer science and video games are built on. According to Racing the Beam co-author Nick Montefort, both computer science and speedrunning involve studying and exploring structures to find new and unexpected techniques. The Atari 2600, for instance, was only designed to display 5 sprites on screen at once, but with some ingenious rule bending, games like Space Invaders were able to fill the screen with dozens of little aliens, and even something simple like Pong grew out of a crafty manipulation of an oscilloscope. 40 years later, speedrunners still find clever workarounds of a given system's rules. We should celebrate speedruns as the beautiful, glitchy, technology-exploiting contests that they are. After all, we're only going to see more stuff like this as life becomes increasingly digital. Things like big data and genetic research are already important trends in sports, and there is surely more to come. So what do you all think? Why are speedruns important? And what are some of your favorites? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. A big thank you to some of the speedrunners who helped us with this episode. LackAttack, who's a world record contender in Legend of Zelda, Truljin, who's busily anatomizing Dying Light, and Zero Master, who's a Master Doom speedrunner. We'll link to your pages in the description. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done this episode without you. I'll see you all next week. Last week we talked about whether or not games about war like Battlefield and Call of Duty misrepresent the reality of modern combat. Let's see what you had to say. Nicoyutub very succinctly says that games are games, games about war are games, and war is war. I understand the point that you're trying to make, that war is a separate domain of human activity. Obviously, you don't want to belie the gravity of war by making games about it or saying that games about war can somehow truly sort of show the reality of what it's like to be at war. That said, I think it's a little bit of a false dichotomy given some of the history that I laid out in the episode in terms of the history of war games and how actual military generals used to play board games in order to sort of practice military strategy. Regardless, as I mentioned in my past episode about the secret history of video games and warfare, the military has relied on the video game industry for quite some time, whether it's things like Battlezone or more recently with experiments with virtual reality. So I think that though you're right in the sense I don't want to say that, games about war can sort of be at the same level as war itself. That said, there is a little bit of a revolving door there. Stephen Covell wrote an amazing email to us, which you can do, pbsgameshow@gmail.com. Stephen actually served in the 82nd Airborne as a combat medic. He's seen actual battles, and he plays a lot of games. So obviously Stephen points out that no video game is fully going to be able to capture the reality of war, but there's one specific aspect that Stephen thinks that games are lacking, which is that in actual war you have to sort of deal with the humanity of the enemy that you're facing, whereas with games it's kind of like a lot of escapism. You don't kind of like wrestle with these larger questions. There is a game that he pointed to that both he and I are fans of, this game 6 Days in Fallujah, which originally was going to be published by Konami. The idea was that you would take the place of a soldier in a traditional sort of first-person shooter game, but it would be set in a realistic place, which was Fallujah during the 6-day siege there. So it was a little bit of documentary, a little bit of first-person shooter, but it was designed to ask these larger moral questions about the reality of war. Regardless, unfortunately that game was canceled, so it's never going to see the light of day. But thank you so much, Stephen, for weighing in, and of course, thank you so much for your service. OGjimbo says that I glossed over a big piece of why people play games about war, and that's online co-op multiplayer. And you're totally right. We really didn't get too much into the distinction. Obviously, a game like Call of Duty ships with two sort of primary ways to play it. There's the campaign mode, which is more story-based, which I spent a lot of time talking about, and then there's the co-op multiplayer. A big reason why, there's two reasons. One is that, the way that these games are marketed is through the campaign. So when there's a new Call of Duty commercial, they're not just showing you new multiplayer maps in the commercial. They're showing you Kevin Spacey and the story. So in terms of how these games are presented to the public and the hundreds of millions of dollars they're spent on marketing them, it's much more on this story aspect. The other reason is that, the online co-op multiplayer modes, those mechanically, there's, not really a story structure there. I mean, those are much more like free play environments and have much more in line with a game like League of Legends than they do with a movie like Hurt Locker. So anyway, I understand the distinction there. Thanks for pointing that out, and I wish I had more time to really explore that with more depth. Nicole Majeski says that she has a friend who learned how to fight from playing Tekken. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I learned all my street fighting from Street Fighter, so, to each his own. And one last thing, the set seems a little bit different today. Can't quite put my finger on it, but it's like I'm seeing the world a little bit more clearly. Oh well.